How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of Weekly NFL Picks on Riley's Redzone. Excited to have you here for this video. And as it's coming out on a Sunday, some of the games have already started to happen, but just wanted to get this video out to you guys. I do not have a guest picker this week because we are stacking the slate for the next few weeks. So make sure to stay tuned to the channel for some fun guests on this show. So I'm going to give you my picks for this week, but let's also recap how the last few guest pickers and myself have done so far this season. So both Cody and Rob, who joined us over the last few weeks, they went 10-6, so they're tied in terms of that standings. On the season, I'm 31-17 heading into this week. Last week was my worst week so far, going 500. Hoping to get back to what we were doing in weeks 1 and 2. And as mentioned, some of the games have already started, so I'll tell you what happened there. But last thing before we really dive into it is if you're new to the channel, I select just straight up who I think will win the game. I often mention spreads to talk about who is the favorite in the matchup, but in the end, I just pick who I think will win. And I picked the Arizona Cardinals to defeat the Seattle Seahawks, which did not happen. It ended up being a very, very close game, but when I was looking at the board, I thought that was one of the upsets I might take a swing on, because you can't go all favorites, and it was going to be a tight one, I thought, and it was, but Seattle won that, so I do start the week 0-1. Vikings and Steelers are currently playing right now. I went with Minnesota. If it were a home game purely for Pittsburgh, I might go the Steelers, but it's overseas right now, and so that's more of a neutral thing to me, and so I'm going to go with Minnesota. Carson Wentz in the squad led them to a big win last week over the Bengals. It's going to be fascinating to see how that quarterback situation turns out, but I think that roster is just incredibly strong, so I'll go with Minnesota in that matchup. Then we go to the Commanders and the Falcons. Despite, if Jaden Daniels was banged up last week, they still got it done, and for that reason, there's a piece of me that really thinks a strong bounce back is coming for Atlanta after they absolutely just couldn't do anything against Carolina. I do still think there's some potential there, but I'm going to play it safe here and go with Washington. And now with, the change in quarterback, they are actually, at the moment that I'm looking at now, underdogs, and that's changed throughout the week since I originally made these picks. So that is an underdog selection for myself, but I'm going to go with that one as well. Let's go to the Chargers and the Giants, and these two teams are very interesting because the Chargers have had a very strong season so far. The Giants are making a quarterback switch this week, turning to Jackson Dart. I understand the timing, I guess. I mean, Russell Wilson was not as bad as some of the quarterback benchings we've seen over the last few seasons, in my opinion. But I also get it that you want to see what you have in Jackson Dart. You invest in him, and it's going to be very fascinating to see what he does this week. Chargers are favored by about 6. I'll take Los Angeles just to win it in this matchup. Meanwhile, we go to an AFC South duel that is between the Titans and the Texans, two teams that are struggling this season very badly. I keep thinking it's going to be the week for Houston to bounce back. I haven't seen it really yet, in my opinion, that explosive offense and defense that we thought we have seen over the last few seasons. They are almost a touchdown. They are a touchdown practically favorite against Tennessee here. So I'll take the safe choice in Houston, but that could be really, really scrappy because it's a divisional game, no doubt. Now, how about this? We got the Eagles and the Bucks. This is a top tier matchup, folks. I am very excited to see what happens in this game. I think these are two of the top 5, and for me, even creeping towards the top 3 teams in the league right now. And Philly is my number 1 at the moment in terms of who I think the best football team in the league is. I think the Philadelphia Eagles haven't really shown that they haven't lost in bad fashion over. It's been a long time since we've seen that. They always, if it's not, they're going to be competitive. But I think that Tampa Bay is something kind of gutsy, a little special. everything mathematically and even like mentally says to just go with the Eagles here. But once again, I talk about taking swings on upsets because they're at home. And although I do have a tier gap between the top two teams and the next group, I've got the Bucs in the top four. So I'm going to go with Tampa Bay in this matchup and Baker Mayfield to get them a win, even though that is a very bold call, without a doubt. That is going to be probably, that's one of those where there honestly might be more to lose than gain, but I'll take a swing. They're only 3.5-point underdogs. That's fascinating. Now, Carolina and New England. I'm somewhat shocked that after the strong showing Carolina had last week, they are not favored by 5.5 points right now. That's a little interesting to me. I do think New England is still probably the better team. These are two teams in a very similar category to me with younger quarterbacks. Don't think the roster is quite built strong enough around them yet. And, for Bryce Young, it's like, is he the long-term guy? I'm going to go with New England. They are the favorite here, but once again, I'm kind of shocked after a strong performance last week that Carolina isn't a little bit closer in that spread. So that will be an interesting one to watch. Two teams that desperately kind of need a win if they want to stay in the hunt. Now, the Saints and the Bills, I just got to play it safe here. This is the biggest spread of the week. We're talking about 15 points that the Bills are favored by over the Saints. So I'll take Buffalo. The Saints are just a mystery box this season. They're going to pull off a couple upset wins, I have to think, but I'll go with the safe team in Buffalo at this very moment. Now let's shift ahead to the Browns and the Lions. The Browns get a win last week against the Packers that nobody was practically expecting, but the Lions are looking really, really solid. The fact that you get a strong win against Chicago and then you're able to battle it out and get a win against Baltimore, that was huge for what they're looking to do. And so they're 10-point favorites in this game. I'm going to play it safe and go with Detroit. I think the quarterback situation in Cleveland is going to be fascinating to watch because if Joe Flacco could somehow win them games, you do maybe not get a chance to see the rookies. Maybe this is a game you could see the rookies if it gets out of hand. We'll have to see what goes on in that one. Jaguars and 49ers. This is going to be a tighter game than people maybe think because of quarterback situations. But although Trevor Lawrence hasn't been that number one pick star that we thought he could be, Mac Jones is out there for San Francisco, and he just is kind of operating. That's what you need from them. And they're favored by 3.5 points. I'm going to stick with San Francisco here. That one's a little bit of a crazy matchup to me. I think it could be really, really fun to see, but I'll go with the Niners over the Jaguars. The Colts and the Rams. This is a great matchup right here. I think that this is where the Colts train finally starts to slow down a little bit, perhaps, just because I really like the Rams this season more so than thinking anything about the Colts. Daniel Jones has been great for Indianapolis so far this season, and they're happy with how they've started this 2025 campaign. But I'm going to take Los Angeles here. They're favored by about 3.5 in this matchup. I really, really like their roster still, and I think that they can be a strong competitive team this season in the NFC. So give me Los Angeles there. Chicago and Las Vegas. I will just say straight up, I am a little bit shocked that the Raiders are favored by 1.5. Now, I know the Bears have had some struggles in some of these weeks, but I think that their upside is a little bit stronger based on, I just think that the Raiders have seen a lot of ups and downs. I am interested to see this matchup. This is really two teams that, once again, it reminds me of the Panthers-Patriots, where if these teams wanted any shot at the postseason, you got to win a game like this. I really don't know how to take this one. I thought that Chicago was going to take a step up this year, and I will say they just haven't quite gotten to that level yet, but I still think that the potential is there. They're just a little bit more inconsistent than I thought they would be. Vegas, I'm still trying to figure out a little bit for the Raiders. So I'll take the Bears and an upset pick in that one. Okay, now this is kind of a crazy game that I'm shocked we didn't get to see at the prime time. Now I guess we've got storylines in the next game, but Baltimore and Kansas City, holy cow, this is going to be a great matchup. I think these are both teams that are going to be competing for the Super Bowl again this season. Going into the year, I think a lot of people were maybe picturing the Bills and Ravens overtaking the Chiefs, that including myself in terms of the rankings, but you can't count out Kansas City. But what's crazy is both of these teams have started, at least record-wise, a little bit slower than we thought. And so you're behind the eight ball if you lose this matchup. Now, with that being said, I have Baltimore ranked higher than the Chiefs. But the Chiefs are at home. And I'm going to take Kansas City as an underdog. They're behind 2.5 points to the Ravens. It doesn't feel right for either of these teams, if that were to happen, to have that many losses for both sides after this game. And that's tough for Baltimore if you consider, a nail biter against Buffalo, can't get it done against Detroit, and then if you can't beat the Kansas City Chiefs, then it's how are you going to get it done in the postseason? And I don't know the answer to that. But I'm going to take Kansas City in an upset matchup, which is something going into the week I maybe didn't expect, and I'm very excited to watch that game later today. Packers and Cowboys, big storyline here, Micah Parsons. Simply put, despite the showing against Cleveland last week, I think it showed that the Packers are breakable. I don't think that their offense is quite to the top tier that these other strong competitors are, but their defense, for the most part, has been incredible. And, I mean, you go with the fact that, the fact they lost that game, allowing less than 20 points and quite a bit less than that, I think it goes to show that their defense still showed up. And, they say, Jordan Love, if you can get us 20 points, we can win the game. And so I think their defense is certainly championship contender quality. I think that they take down the Cowboys here with relative potential confidence in this. But I do think it's going to be fascinating to see the Packers develop throughout the season, because I don't know if they've already leapfrogged into that championship contender range or whether they're still developing. The Jets and the Dolphins, this is just kind of a coin flip. I'm going to be honest with you here, folks. This is a fun but confusing matchup, perhaps, right? We don't know quarterback health of the Jets, and so whether it's going to be, even if Fields were for sure in this game or Tyrod Taylor, both are competitive. They're mobile. Miami has been on the struggle bus this season, but this is maybe their most winnable game in a while to try to get it done. I'm going to say the Dolphins get on the board here. They're favored in this matchup. I'll take them to get a win, but the Jets are really competitive, and I think that could be a crazy game to see. And round it out with the Bengals and the Broncos. After last year's classic, I mean, I remember watching that game on the TV, that it was incredible between these two teams fighting for the postseason. It doesn't have the same weight to it right now because Joe Burrow is hurt. Now, Jake Browning can turn into a superhero for a game. That could happen, but strong favorites are the Denver Broncos, and I'm going to take Denver in this matchup to get the win. So those are my picks for this week. As mentioned, we'll be back next week with hopefully a couple of guest pickers and really stepping up the game in that department over the next few weeks. And as always, apologies this season. We don't have all the fancy graphics all the time, as I haven't had time to develop those, but maybe as we get down the stretch and I get some open time, might be able to get them set for the back half of this season. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. Best of luck if you're making picks of your own to have some success, and I will see you in next week's episode.